Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Today at It's Freitag, I'm with Keith Marks, who's the new executive director at the Colonial here in Keene. Super excited to have Keith here. We met once before and it was a long and really fun conversation. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So give us a little recap on how you found your way from New York via Florida, via Europe. I know you studied in Tel Aviv for a bit. I stalked your LinkedIn. How did you find your way to Keene, New Hampshire?
Yeah, so I was born in New York, and I when I was 10, we moved to Florida, and I grew up down there. And then when I was 21, I moved to Europe. I lived in Europe for a year. I jumped over to Asia, and I lived in Asia for 4 years. And then I lived in Middle East. I lived in Israel, where I was at Tel Aviv University getting my master's in education. Came back to the States with my wife, who is Israeli. And then we have been in Jacksonville, Florida we were there for about 10 years. We weren't excited about living and raising our 2 kids in Jacksonville. We had reservations about being in the South. We had reservations about the future of the South, and both from a climate perspective and also from a political perspective. And there was an opportunity for us to move to Putney, Vermont, where I took over Next Stage Arts. And when the opportunity presented itself, we kind of felt it was one of those keyhole moments that you could kind of sneak through the keyhole and wind up in a magical place. And we arrived in New England. New England's been great. The 5 years have been wonderful. I've learned to ski. I've got a canoe. I'm doing all of the, I've got muck boots, and I've got all types of things that I never even knew about. And about 6 months ago, there was an opportunity to apply for the new role at the Colonial, and I had grown Next Stage to a healthy place, and I felt like jumping to a larger organization was the right move. So here I am.
So let's talk quickly about Next Stage. So Next Stage is similarly to the Colonial, right? Like a venue. And would you say that it's a very similar concept to the Colonial world for you starting, with the new job at the Colonial?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that the scale is different. So Next Stage and Showroom are probably more identical in nature. So when I was interviewing, one of the things that the board was articulating to me was that Showroom really needed some love. And I thought, well, I can do that. I know, because Next Stage and other venues that I've run are that size. That's the world I grew up in. That's the world I know. So running a 900-seat venue is the learning curve, but the mechanics are still the same. It's just the scale is different. So instead of negotiating an artist fee for $2,000 or $3,000, you're negotiating contracts that are $30,000 or $40,000. You still need marketing. You still need to do development and fundraising. You still need to have a strong team, strong processes in place. And so while the size of the Colonial Theater is new for me, the mechanics are relatively the same.
So one of the things that I find very interesting about the Colonial, especially, I guess, compared to other sort of downtown New England theaters, is the scale, right? It is a lot larger than most other venues around. How do you think it is that that still exists here, in 2025? Because it's a rarity, right? There's not that many old downtown theaters that have been able to stick around.
So let's start with the historical context of why a theater like that exists. So in Keene, I think there were 3 or 4 major theaters in the city. We're down to 1. I think at some point the statistic was around the United States I forget exactly which decade, there were something like 20,000 theaters like the Colonial. At some point a few years ago, I think that number was down to 800. So the sense of scale just doesn't fit a modern context. If I were to create a business plan for you now and say, I'd like for you to invest in a 900-seat theater in Keene, New Hampshire, would you invest? No investor worth their salt would ever say, yes, of course we would invest. So the financial economics are different because of the historical context that these theaters were built. There was no obviously no smartphones. There was no social media. There was no television. So the Colonial's experiencing its 101st year this year. So when these theaters were built, these are the places that the community came to see culture that was outside of the borders of what was possible. That no longer exists. I can experience unending culture from around the world, from a bus seat, from my pocket. And so if we're really committed to having a space like the Colonial, then I think the community needs to understand that it's like a time traveler. It almost shouldn't exist, but we know the economic impact it has. We know the cultural impact it has. We know the marketing impact it has. So we understand that there are real values of having a Colonial, but not necessarily the financial implications of having a venue that size.
I think you're great. I think, and I had Adam here a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things he said is like, the restaurants full when the Colonial has a show, because I think it increases the radius of the draw that Keene has when there's a show that people come to, because they won't necessarily drive 90 minutes for dinner, but they will drive 90 minutes for a show they want to see.
Yeah, the understanding there, I think, is that we have a mechanism to impact the economics of the place, and those are just the A to B impacts. There's also like the C, D, and E impacts, which means that those people go back to those communities that they live in, and they get to tell people, we had this amazing experience. There's a city called Keene that's an hour and a half drive away, and they tell their friends, Burlington wasn't always Burlington. Northampton wasn't always Northampton. It became the mythology that built around these places took other people coming, experiencing something, and then going back and talking about it. And I think Keene has that possibility, that opportunity, but we need to sort of be, as a community, aligned in the same direction. And it feels a little siloed right now.
I think it's so true, because I think about like Brattleboro. Everybody talks about Brattleboro being so unique, so hip, so like there's so much happening, so much culture, so much creativity happening in the town. Probably, the downtown is like half the size of Keene. And then people go to Northampton to eat all the time or to see stuff. But I don't think people in Northampton have Keene on the radar to go to when they want to experience something.
I think that we get stuck in nostalgia a little bit. Brattleboro has been stuck in its nostalgia rut as it's been spiraling down over the past few years. It used to be a vibrant, artsy place. If you didn't know that history and you showed up today, would you travel? Would that history travel with you? Probably not. And so I think Keene is in this place where it has a certain sense of nostalgia. The fortunate thing is that it's going strong right now, especially coming from Vermont. Its unique value proposition is that you have a thriving middle class, which is not the same middle class. It's on the decline from what I hear from people from where it was a few years ago, when there were more businesses that were owned privately here. So we're slipping a little bit. I think it's important to understand that we need to support entrepreneurs. We need to support the organizations that are creating opportunities for people to come to this region. And so if we're not, it becomes dangerous when a community sits back and rests in nostalgia. We've been this beacon for so long, we'll continue to be this beacon. Maybe I think you also need fresh energy, new resources.
I always think about that when people in the Monadnock region, they talk about, the region's pride in manufacturing. And I don't know any data, but I feel like that sometimes is a bit of a dated approach to like what makes this region strong, because I think there's more manufacturing leaving the region than there's new manufacturing coming. Yes, we have manufacturing giants here that are, best in the world for a lot of things, but it reminds me of like, I come from southern Germany, reminds me of southern Germany. Like we're like, oh, we build cars, and now we realize, well, we build combustion engines really well here. Like as soon as they turn electric, we're not that good anymore, because we have an entire economy built around the combustion engine. And we're very good at it, but that's not what we need in the next 50 years.
Right. And I think as companies sell to outside people, Markham is a good example. The Putnams have been extremely generous in this community, but Markham no longer is philanthropic in this community. And so we run the risk of whenever a company like that is sold to an outside owner, their investment in the community wanes as an organization, as a company. Like I said, we're very, very lucky to have the continued philanthropy of the family. And so as these engineering, manufacturing companies are being sold, or they're leaving town, or they're closing, we're not replenishing them with an entrepreneurial class that exists here. And so we're going to have to find new ways of funding arts, of civic organizations like libraries, of newspapers. The Keene Sentinel, I just had a great conversation with Adam Burke and their publisher, Tom Ewing. And, people just take for granted. They think, oh, well, independent media will exist because it's always existed. And it's a unique thing for a community to have all of these different things. And so at some point, the community has to speak with their wallets. The community has to step up and say, these things are meaningful and important.
Yeah, I had a conversation, I don't even remember who it was with, who they told me that the Keene Sentinel has one of the biggest newsrooms, like independent newsrooms in the entire state.
I would almost venture to say in the country, because I was up there a few weeks ago, because I have a background in journalism. I've been in newsrooms, and I have watched over the last few years how, the Reformer in Brattleboro is a great example. Paul Belagore bought it, and it's, it's still a functioning paper, but the journalists that work there are carrying a big load. So when I went up to the Sentinel's newsroom and I saw the amount of reporters up there, it's like, wow, we as a community are really lucky to have an owner and a publisher that value independent journalism.
But the business model still needs to work.
That's right.
I mean, they still need to at least break even. Yeah, no. So let's go back to the Colonial. So obviously it's been a staple of, Keene culture for decades. And like, what's your vision? Like, I know you said like you want to reinvigorate, reimagine the showroom. What's like, if you had your magic wand, the Keith magic wand, and you could say, okay, in 5 years, this is what I want Colonial to feel like, to mean to people. This is the kind of space that I want to create. What would that be?
So ultimately, the goal is a vibrant, fiscally sound, community-based organization that people have pride in. So that's the North Star. And the rocket ship that takes you to the North Star is relationships. My job is to go out and either strengthen, repair, or create the relationships to the rest of this community. I think that our widget, the thing that gets people excited about, is our programming. And so I am starting to get involved in the programming. The math is really tough. Everybody wants to see A-list performers. And the reality is, because we're only 900 seats, to bring in somebody who is going to command $60,000, $50,000, tickets are going to have to be $120, $90, and $80.
Yeah, because it's 900 seats. I mean, everybody can do the math. And
That's right.
You need probably 1.5 times, 2 times the booking fee back to break even.
Yeah, 100%. And the math, the production expenses and all those things. So our challenge is finding the class of artists that are still going to get people excited and also be a reasonable, the agents.
At 900 seats.
Yeah. And the agents, the job is to get as much money for their artists as possible. Yeah. And, sponsors can only go so far, and the community can only afford a certain amount of price point of ticket. So I think that the recipe is, how do we hone in on the class of artists and presentations that are affordable? How do we build relationships with community partners? How do we strengthen our relationships with our sponsors and our donors? Ultimately, when people give philanthropy, there has to be some sort of emotional connection. And people have nostalgia for the Colonial, but I don't necessarily know if we've done a good job over the past few years of creating that emotional charge. And so my job right now is to rebuild relationships, reconnect with the community, think about programming in a more creative way that gets people engaged. And then with Showroom, we're going to bring artists that couldn't necessarily be on the minds of everybody just because of the nature of the space. And again, the math sort of doesn't add up. If you take in the production expenses plus the available seats, there's not a lot left for artist fees. And so if you're getting, if you're shooting lower with artist fees, you're getting lower talent that's not going to like really impress people. And so what we need to do is find a funding model that works. And so we're toying with different ideas about building relationships with local civic organizations like Rotary or Lions Club. We're talking about building relationships with potential underwriters who maybe don't have the funds to underwrite a main stage show, but they love music and they love, the showroom and want to be a part of our success. So could we find a way to underwrite the additional expenses, need to get a great artist in, partner with an organization that's going to bring their community in, and then they walk out having, an amazing experience. Ultimately the psychology is that we're looking at people's a return on investment. People invest their time and they want to know that they're investing that time wisely. My job, if you were to boil it down to like what we're really doing, is we're helping cultivate future feelings of regret.
Yeah.
And if
that's a good way to put it.
And if we're not actively living into that sort of that brand promise, then why would people give philanthropy? Why would they become members? We need to create some level of excitement. And then the last thing I'll say is, if we need to rewire the way people think about the Colonial and Showroom, and for that matter, all arts nonprofits, they are not places of entertainment. Entertainment can happen on your phone. We're never going to compete with that. We're places of community, and we traffic in arts and culture to cultivate senses of community. And the organizations that I think are going to have a vibrant future are the ones that understand that they're community-based organizations and not entertainment-based organizations.
Yeah, because, entertainment works for these very few large-scale venues that can get the people that, to get the acts that can get the people to sell out tickets in minutes, because those will always exist, right? But I think it's when people go somewhere because they want to be part of a group, experience something, and not so much whether it's an A-list talent that is on stage.
You know what, though? I would make the argument that these theaters that are independently owned, if we're talking about the ones that are owned by, and they know how to turn the dials and squeeze the juice really well. But the Capitol Center and the Palace Theater and Music Hall and these New Hampshire icons, their profit margins aren't probably far off from our profit margins. To just be transparent with you, at a sold out show at the Colonial, our net profits are only between $3,000 to $8,000. So if you're talking about running an organization that's has a 101-year-old building, and you have a staff and you have all the overhead and expenses, the math, I don't think it will ever make sense, because you're not. It's not that these theaters that have 1,200, 1,500, 1,800, 2,500 seats get to take more profit in. It's their artist fees. They can go after a Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, because they can fill twice as many seats for $90 each, and then they have a little bit more money to play with.
Yeah. I just talked to the executive director of the theater in Stamford, Connecticut, and he said to me, his community is unique because there's so much wealth in Stamford, Connecticut, that he can put on sale a $250 ticket and still sell out. Most communities can't do that.
Yeah, no, it's unique. This is, not even a independent music or, just venue in Boston would be able to do that. There's, I don't know where the pain point is, but it probably starts between $100 and $150 somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that, I think the entire industry, the whole ecosystem, has to rework how they market and sell what they do to the communities. We're not an entertainment house. We are a community.
Isn't it at the same time true that for talent and artists, live shows and events become more and more important? Because on streaming, you'd have all these smaller acts, right? They used to make money on record sales. And now streaming barely pays because it's like a winner takes all model. So it's only the really, really big ones really get paid and the rest just doesn't. How, is it also really tough for all the talent that you're booking because their math also doesn't really make sense?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think artists are looking at making the bulk of their income through live touring, which is probably why They have agents that are trying to squeeze presenters. So, it becomes problematic because we're stuck between being negotiated up on the agent artist side to pay top dollar. We're being negotiated, and probably more of a latent psychology between the presenter and the audience, where the audience says, well, we want A-level talent, but we don't want to pay for A-level talent tickets. Sponsors, we need to get them to come up. We go, well, it's not, if you need more money from us, maybe, we can only do X amount. And then we have, we go back to our donors year after year with our hands out to say, we need you to underwrite this broken business model. So it's really difficult for the presenter to make all four of those pieces work in a way that creates some sort of financial stability for the organization.
I just had an experience with, we were asked to sponsor something really cool for a local organization, and I was really into it, but the figure was too big, and they had, it was a single tier sponsor. It was either a yes or no. There was no lower tier, and I couldn't make it work, and they were like, oh yeah, I don't think there'll be a lower tier because if we don't get the big price, basically, it won't happen. I'm like, well, damn it. I loved it. This is such a great idea. I want to support this. I can, and I think that's where it's probably hard. I don't, your sponsorships, for shows, they're big ticket items. They're probably the amount of organizations that are potential sponsors is not that huge, right? Because it's a lot of money at once. It's not like the Westmoreland 5K. And so I think you're really speaking to a very limited group of businesses that can swing that. So let's change gears a little bit.
Let's do it.
It's Freitag. So last segment in this show, we always talk a little bit about what a good weekend looked like. Now, I know your weekends are probably spent at Colonial, but do you take Monday, Tuesday off? It is Monday now, so.
Yeah, it depends on the weekend and what shows are happening. We had a show on Friday that I was at, and then I was home with my family doing family stuff. This weekend we have 2 shows on Friday, 2 shows on Saturday. So Showroom has a show at 7:30 and the Colonial has a show at 8 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. So I'll spend my whole weekend at work. I'm so new. I'm only 2.5 months into the role that I don't feel like I'll feel comfortable just taking extra days off. So I'm putting in a lot of hours, and requires a lot of me, especially in the beginning. The first year or 2, I think, are going to be pretty heavy. My weekends, though, I try to give it over to my family. Like I said earlier, I've learned how to ski. So the winters, I've carved out time to go skiing, both the downhill and cross country. I like to travel. I like to explore. Actually, a month ago, my wife and I took the kids and we went to Peterborough for the first time. There's a town forest in Chesterfield that we hiked last weekend. And so I'm trying to spend more time in this region, getting to know the area. And as spring comes on, I created a Google My Map for this region. And I took the chamber guide and I populated it with a bunch of dots. And so my hope is that as the weather warms up and farms open up,
This needs to be a shareable resource.
I can share that map
Julie
with you.
Chazelle should pay you for this map and put it on the website. That is brilliant.
Tell Julie I'm happy to send her the link to my map. Yeah, so it's family time, it's cooking time, it's exploring time. I'm somebody who really enjoys new experiences, so I'm always looking for a new direction to go in and a new place to explore, and that's what my weekends turn into.
So, do you guys still live in Putney? Or?
I am still based in Putney. Okay. Yeah, I have a 13 and a 9-year-old, and they're both doing so well. I didn't want to uproot their lives, especially because it's only a 30-minute commute. But my wife and I are spending more time over in this region. I got invited over to a social hang near Spofford Lake over the weekend. And so I hung out with some people, community members in this area.
Can I ask you a question? Because, I live on the other side of the river in Westmoreland. Literally could swim to Putney in about 3 minutes if it wasn't so cold right now. I've never understood this. From where I live, Brattleboro is closer than Keene. It's 5 minutes closer. Why is it this river is this uncrossable divide that even you who has lived in Putney for 5 years, you're I'm new to this region. I'm but you've been here for 5 years, and you've never been to Peterborough. I don't get it. There's people don't go left, either they're in Vermont and that's what they do, or they're in New Hampshire. I don't get it. It's just a bridge. It's not that scary.
Jan, I have such guilt that I carry with me now that I'm over here every day, because prior to, Keene was a place where it's like, yeah, they have a nice downtown and restaurants, and there's a Walmart and a Target. And like that was sort of like beginning and end. And I am learning so much about how culturally rich this community, this region is. I went with Jim Murphy, whose son Jeff Murphy owns Brewbakers, took me on a 3-hour tour of the region. We got in the car and drove, and he drove me to Jaffrey and drove me to Peterborough, and we stopped by a glass blowing place in Marlborough, and the amount of nature and arts and culture and food that exist here are so overwhelming. It's so rich.
Because it's true the other way around. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but like nobody has a clue what's happening in Putney, Brattleboro, or I don't know, like drive 10, go to Newfane. Like nobody is ever over there. And like people from there don't come over here. I don't understand. I'm like, it's so close.
Yeah, I make the joke that Vermont is like a state for like all the introverted weirdos that like they could go live elsewhere. Whereas like it feels like in New Hampshire is a little bit more of like a sense of just a little bit more where like civilization has touched. And so I think that what's going on in Vermont, there's some good things going on, but I think if you were just to sort of like lay it all out in a list, people on this side of the river have so many more options to get into that I think I understand why people in the Monadnock region aren't necessarily excited to jump over to Brattleboro, but I have no idea why my Vermont friends and me prior to 2.5 months ago just didn't see this as another playground to play in.
But I think, for example, like there's, on the other hand, on like outdoor recreation, like Vermont beats New Hampshire, like, or like, you know, with Windham County beats Cheshire County. There's more cool rivers to like swim in. There's more swimming holes. There's cooler mountain bike trails. It's better for just riding bikes in general, because there's more back roads. The hiking is good in really both, but like Vermont has a lot to offer. New Hampshire has a lot to offer. Like I don't understand why it is so close, and yet there's no exchange whatsoever.
So I serve on the board of SEVIDS, which is the Southeast Vermont Development Strategy. And years ago, they paid a consultant to help them figure out a regional marketing initiative that would be a Southern Vermont. So Bennington County and Windham County. And the consultant said, you guys have this all backwards. You're more closely aligned to Cheshire County than you are to Bennington County. The mountains that separate Bennington to Windham are going to be a geographic, like a barrier, a divide. You should be looking to build relationships east and see more of an economic dynamic.
Because Bennington's far away from Brattleboro. I mean, it's a solid hour.
It's an hour from Brattleboro.
Yeah, like it's, I mean, and Brattleboro Keene is 35 minutes. Like, if even, like, and that's what I don't understand is like there's also, I mean, between Brattleboro and Bennington, there's just nothing. Like, I mean, there's a couple cute towns, but otherwise a lot of nothing.
Yeah, there's Wilmington there, but I think there should be more collaboration between the two communities. I think both would be served well by building a stronger ties, and whether that's in the arts and culture space or in the nature space or in the business community space, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to reflect a stronger region that doesn't exist. And, you know, why the river? I don't know. It's like a feng shui thing where it's like,
I guess because I moved here from far, far away and I moved straight to Westmoreland and like there's a river and I can literally, I mean, my entire view out of my kitchen window is Vermont and not New Hampshire because that's the back of the house. It never made sense to me because when I go grocery store, I go to Brattleboro and pay sales tax because it's closer. And like, so for me, it's always just whatever is more convenient. But for so many people, there's this huge disconnect. I mean, especially like I know the business community best. It's like the Greater Monadnock Collaborative stops in Westmoreland. It's like hard stop, but no further. But no, it's interesting. Cool. So what do you do when you're not with kids, when you're not at work? What do you do, like hobbies on your own, when you really have time to choose whatever to do?
I kind of throw my soul into work. I really am energized by it. And I was that way at Next Stage. It's that way when I was in Jacksonville, Florida. You know, I got my master's in nonprofit leadership from UPenn a couple years ago. And so, you know, I invest in myself. Yoga and massage has been part of my life. My wife and I owned a Pilates massage studio. I'm a neuromuscular therapist, and she's a Pilates teacher, and now she's a property appraiser, and I'm an arts administrator. You know, I think spending time with my family is really important. I've gotten really into sort of like health and wellness and like food. I buy, this is going to sound a little weird, and I never thought I'd be this guy, but I've gotten into organs, like processing beef organs, and like, you know, I was actually encapsulating my organ powder for my wife. It's really helped her health by doing this. I read quite a bit, and really like I look at this new role at the Colonial and Showroom as like where I get to throw all of my strategic braininess into this project. You know, I played chess for many years, and that's sort of like I learned how to play Chinese chess, which is a different like level of complexity. And so like I enjoy learning. I enjoy being mentally engaged. I tell people, don't worry about me when I'm too busy. Worry about me when I don't have enough on my plate. And so what's great is that becoming the executive director of the Colonial and Showroom is giving me the opportunity to throw my all of my mental, emotional, physical self into this project. And it does kind of bring me joy to problem solve and strategize. And
well, because it's a big lever, right? Like you have a big lever that you can try out everything that you've learned at like, you know, Next Stage or before at and make real impact, like in an organization that size, especially like relative to the community that it's based in. I mean, it's probably, I don't know if that's too far-fetched, but it is for arts the biggest one, right? Like the one that everybody looks at probably the most.
Yeah, there's a certain level of ambassadorship that I enjoy. You know, like, I mean, it has its ups and downs. Like when I was at Next Stage and I'd be at the diner with my kids on a Saturday morning for breakfast, you know, people would want to come and tell me what they think I should be doing. A little bit annoying, but also really wonderful that the community feels so empowered to come and communicate about something that's so meaningful to them. And so, you know, already I've been invited to speak in front of both Rotaries. I'm speaking in front of Lions Club next month. The mayor's invited me to city council. He's asked me to be on an economic, like a plan for the city. You're inviting me to be here on this podcast. So ambassadorship is something that I take very seriously because I need to get this message out that I want to move the organizations forward, and I want to build relationships in the community. And ultimately, it takes a lot of time to build that level of relationships. And so that's where most of my focus is. I mean, if it's not totally obvious already from this podcast, I love talking and I love people. And I get a lot of energy from being around new people and learning things. And so I'm somebody who thinks out loud, who likes to work in group, who enjoys ambassadorship. And when I'm given a mission to lead such an organization that's iconic and so full of opportunity, it like really charges my battery. Not to say that there aren't problems, but as long as I know that there will be problems to solve, I'm never disappointed. And I know that this comes with the territory. So this, you know, I would say work, family, and my yoga, my health. These are the things that I am excited about. And then the skiing and the canoeing and all the things that I get to go out and go hiking. Yeah. That also feeds me. Yeah. So
cool. Well, thank you, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jan. It really means a lot.
No, that was really fun. And I mean, everybody knows where they can find you. Just go to Colonial website and find Keith and give him a call.
It's Keith at thecolonial.org. Don't be shy.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan.
Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every other Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.